Welcome to part 2 of our webinar series on maximizing your search results on AmericanAncestors.org. My name is Ginevra Morse, the Online Education Coordinator at the New England Historic Genealogical Society. I'll be moderating today's event. Giving today's presentation is once again Andy Hanson-Dvoracek, Web Content Coordinator. Andy will be presenting for about 40 minutes. He'll first give a quick review of Part 1, discuss some important features you'll find within your AmericanAncestors.org online user profile, how to search our digital journals and periodicals, go over our external databases, and finally discuss ways you can broaden your search and hopefully break down some of those genealogical brick walls. Anytime during the presentation, please go ahead and type your questions into the question panel to the right of your screen. We'll answer as many of those as we can in the last 10 to 15 minutes of the session. And as a reminder, we are recording this event and we'll post it to our website, hopefully by tomorrow, so you can review it in the future. All right, so without further ado, take it away, Andy.
Thank you, Ginevra. And I'd like to thank all of you again for taking the time to join us for this webinar again today, both to those of you who are joining us for the first time for the second part, as well as those of you who were with us for the first part last month. Before diving into these more advanced techniques that we're going to talk about today, I'd like to quickly review some of the material that we covered in the first part, both as a review as well as to bring those who weren't here for that webinar up to speed. Just as a reminder, you can watch the entirety of the first part on our online learning center, and that's at AmericanAncestors.org/watch if you'd like to revisit some of these topics in a little bit more detail. So the most important thing to remember, really our main point from the first part, was to start your searches wide and then get progressively narrower. Not only is it easier to filter through too many results rather than not enough, but our search engine doesn't introduce fuzziness the way that other genealogical sites do. However, we will be introducing and talking about some ways that we can bring some of that fuzziness into our searches later in this section. So our second tip from the last part was to follow those database search tips. Really take advantage of how unique each database we have is. It is a tremendous amount of data and a tremendous variety of data that we have at AmericanAncestors.org. And so the meaning of the content that's searched in any particular field can differ depending on that selected database. So if you narrow your search down by database, using that database menu right in the middle of the advanced search page, you can look for search tips that will appear between the location row and the keyword field on the bottom. For example, if I'm searching this database, the Beekman patent, I see that since this entire database refers to basically the same place and time period, it hasn't been indexed by either of those. So I need to leave the year fields as well as the county, city, and town field blank in order to get results. Additionally, if I'm looking for featured family sketches and go into a little bit more depth, I have the opportunity to type featured into the keyword field. So to get the most out of any particular database, make sure to take a look at these search tips. So for many of our image viewers, you have the option of both printing the record, or you can save it as an image, as a JPEG file. But you can take advantage of your browser or operating system's capabilities and have a third option of saving the image as a PDF. There are a lot of advantages that we talked about to that. But in order to do that, what you need to do is use the print dialog, and then you'll find something either in your browser or your operating system that usually refers to print as PDF, and that's how you can get your files that way. And our last tip was to take advantage of citation information to help organize your research. Keeping a research log will help you make sense of things no matter whether you're in the middle of writing, collaborating with other researchers, or just starting out in your research. And that citation information, once you've gotten to a database image, can be found at the bottom of every page, as well as for each particular database in our database catalog. So now that we're used to doing some basic searches and some tips for the website at large, let's dive a little bit deeper into some of the more advanced features that we have available at AmericanAncestors.org. One thing I'd like to mention before getting further into this is that all of these techniques and features that I'll be discussing are available both for full members as well as our guest user program. But you do need an account to use these. So if you don't have an account, you can go to AmericanAncestors.org/free, and that will give you more information on our guest user program. We will talk about some databases that require membership, but these user profiles and then the later search operators we'll be talking about are available for everyone. So once you've logged into your account, your user profile can be accessed by clicking on your name at the top of every page. So if you see a link that says log in, then you need to log into your account. If you've successfully logged in, you should see welcome your name, and that's the link that we're going to be following to get to our user profile. So the user profile page is the place where we can change our account information, such as our email address. We can change your password. You can change your mailing address, and if you're a full member, you can also then choose the option of whether you get our various periodicals in the mail or whether you want to get them digitally. As well as you can see your current membership level and your renewal date when your current membership expires. This is also where you can take advantage of some of the social aspects of AmericanAncestors.org, and those come into play on our discussion boards that you can get to at AmericanAncestors.org/discussions. It's a great place to meet other researchers, to discuss questions, to find similar research topics, pool your knowledge. So the way that you appear on the discussions board is controlled on our profile page. You can select the picture that appears on your posts. If you meet colleagues who you want to stay in better communication with on the discussion boards, you can add them to your colleagues folder. You can also publicly state what your current research topics are, as well as search other people's research topics, and that's a great way to find other people who are working on the same things to be able to collaborate on these sorts of projects. And additionally, we have two search features. These aren't social ones. These are just for you. You can save searches, and you can select a set of favorite databases. So why would you want to save some searches? There's one of perhaps the best reasons is that if there are ancestors that you are repeatedly searching for, there's a particular line that you're trying to follow, you'll want to create a saved search. There's a saying that if you do anything more than 3 times, you should automate it. So this way that you can always you can go back to a larger number of records and go through them without having to do it all in a single session. You don't have to sit at your computer for hours on end trying to sift through this particular search. Second, the search is re-executed each time that you bring it up. So as we correct or add new databases, those new results will be included each time you perform the search again. Third, it allows you to keep your search criteria consistent, especially as we use some of the other tips that we talk about in this session to create increasingly more complicated searches. It really saves you a lot of time to make sure you're not misspelling things and that you've got all of your operators in the right place. And the search is also portable, so you can access it from any computer or mobile device that you use to log on to AmericanAncestors.org. So now that we've discussed why we should save some searches, let's talk about how you do it. So I'm going to go to our advanced search page. If you don't recall from the last seminar, you can get to this page by clicking on Search on any page. And I'm going to revisit one of the searches that we did last time. In this case, it's going to be for John Sturgis, looking at the year range from 1850 to 1950. And just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to do it across all databases. So now that I've got all my search terms in place, the next step is to click the Save This Search button that's found in the upper right-hand corner of the search box. And so we've got our floppy disk that our old school reminder of how things used to be saved. So this will open a dialog box prompting us to name this search. Now this is the only way that we have to identify the search once we save it, so we want to make sure that it's adequately descriptive. Normally using all of the search terms would get pretty cumbersome. They'd get to be pretty long if you put something in every field. But I've only used the first, last name, and the year range in this one, so I'm going to just call it John Sturgis 1850 to 1950, and then click Save. So after I've done that, I can go back to my user profile, and you can see that our saved search for John Sturgis 1850 to 1950 is in the saved search field, as well as two links, one to execute the search and then one to delete the search. So if I go ahead and I click that execute link, I'm going to get search results just as if I had clicked the search button from the advanced search page with those search terms. Now, as you probably can notice on this screenshot, that Save the Search button is still there in the upper right-hand corner of the search box. So even though I've performed the search already, let's say I do a search, find that it returns a lot of results that I'm interested in, that it's been very valuable, and I want to save it for later, I can still go up to that button and click Save this search even after executing the search the first time. Now you can save as many searches as you like. However, each search must have a unique name. So if you want to replace a search, you must delete the first one using this delete link before you can save a new search under that same name. And just as a reminder, clicking the execute button does re-perform the search each time. It doesn't come up with saved results. It redoes the search. So as we add more databases and correct and revise databases, those new additions and revisions will appear each new time that you perform the search. So another way to streamline your research is by using the Favorite Databases feature. Now, while you can search a number of related databases using the category feature, Favorite Databases allows you to create your own collection of databases that you can search simultaneously. So if we go back to our user profile page, the Favorite Databases feature can be found on the right pane below where you saw the saved searches. So here there's a drop-down menu that contains every single database that we have in alphabetical order. There's no way to sort this one by category, unfortunately, but you can select the databases that you'd like to use and then click the Add button to add them to your collection. So in this case, I'm just going to grab I'm going to add Dexter's Memoranda on the Town of Boston, one volume of The Great Migration, G to H, the journal that we publish here, the New England Historical and Genealogical Register, as well as the Index of Revolutionary War Pensioners. And so these are 4 databases from 4 different categories. I've got some vital records, a genealogy, some military records, and a journal. So there wouldn't be a way to search all of these databases simultaneously without using our Favorite Databases feature. But if you add a database that you don't care for or it hasn't been terribly helpful, you can select it in this field and then click the Remove button. That'll remove it from your favorite databases. So let's go back to the advanced search page, see how this looks. Above the databases drop-down menu, we have our favorites only checkbox. Checking that reduces the selection from everything that we have to just those favorite databases that you've selected. We do still have an option called All, but that doesn't search across all of our databases anymore. It searches across all of your favorite databases. So I'm going to do a big wide open search using this. I'm going to use the last name of Smith. And if I were to do that across all of our databases, that would return millions, maybe tens of millions of results. But you can see here that it's still a lot. We still have close to 45,000 results, but certainly not as many as if we had searched all of them. And you can see that it's only those 4 databases are represented in this results by databases facet. So one of our great strengths that we have here of our collections at AmericanAncestors.org is the number of journals and periodicals that we have available as searchable databases. This is something that really not enough people take advantage of. So I'd just be curious to know how many of you have used journals and periodicals in your own research. So we're going to do a quick poll here. Just click yes or no, and we'll get some results in just a couple seconds. All right. So it looks like a lot of you are already taking advantage of these, and that's fantastic. About 3/4 of you. I'm hoping that we can get the rest of you on the train of using these resources, and maybe give the majority of you who are already looking at journals some better tips in getting more out of these resources. So as the majority of you know, these journals contain well-sourced, well-vetted genealogies written by experts, and you usually can't find these anywhere else. And a lot of times these articles appear in finding aids like Hollick's New Englanders in the 1600s or Torrey's New England Marriages prior to 1700. So it's good to be able to have these resources available. And we currently offer over 25 different periodicals ranging back from the 18th century up to the present day. For example, our own journal, the New England Historical and Genealogical Register, the New York Biographical and Genealogical Record, and we have topical journals like the Mayflower Descendant, and nationwide journals and ones outside of New England like the American Genealogist and the Virginia Genealogist. And you can actually see a full list of the journals and periodicals that we have available by going to our databases catalog or selecting journals and periodicals from the category menu on the advanced search page. So searching a periodical is different than searching vital or archival records. It's especially important to use the search tips for these databases since they're each their own publication, they each have their own editorial style. They have very unique characteristics from journal to journal, but there are a couple of things that you can usually expect. And so I've selected the Mayflower Descendant here that has some of the more typical quirks of a journal like this. They're often all of our journals are only indexed by name, publication year, and article title. The year ranges represent publication years, not content years. So if you were to search in the 17th or 18th century, when a lot of this information were to be taking place, you wouldn't return anything because the earliest journal that we have is actually our own, the Register, and that started in 1847. Similarly, since most of these journals have a geographical focus, indexing them by location would be redundant. So accordingly, the location fields must be left blank or else you won't get anything returned. So here I'm going to execute this search for Robert Bradford, leaving the location fields and the year fields blank as suggested by the search tips. So here we have lots of results for Robert Bradford. And the Robert Bradford that we're looking at, this particular article is separating his descendants from those of William Bradford of the Mayflower. And so this guy was running around in I don't remember the exact year. Do more research. But obviously he wasn't there in 2004. This 2004 refers to the publication year when this article was published. So as the search tips and as we just showed, yeah, the most journals you can't use the location field, but geographical information does often appear in the titles of the articles, and we can search those by using the keyword field. So as you can see down here in our keyword field, I'm going to search for Boston in the Mayflower Descendant, and that's going to search all of the article titles. So the results for that, I've still left the location and year blank, just search for Boston, and here you can see I have a number of articles dating back to 1932, all with the word Boston in the article title. So for most of our journals, you'll have an entry for the article at large, which is the title, and then you'll have an entry for each name that appears in the article. So you can search for a name, you can search for a title, but you can't search for both. As you see, we have our article about the non-Mayflower Bradfords from 2004, and there were a lot of hits when we just searched for Robert Bradford, but none of those have appeared here. There are at least 3 journals that this isn't the case for. Our journal, the New England Historical and Genealogical Record, Rhode Island Roots, and the New York Genealogical and Biographical Record. Those are all indexed both by name and article title simultaneously. So if we search for a place name in the register, like Foxborough, we're going to get a lot of results because we're going to get the article at large entry. So in this case, I believe it's going to be Foxborough, just Foxborough, Mass. And then we're going to get a return for every single name that's in that article. So we've got 226. We might be interested in the whole article, but if we're just looking for a particular line, then this is going to be way too much information to try and find. So we do have a way to deal with that, however. Going back to the advanced search page, we have a box called the article title only filter. This only does this. We do only have this enabled for a select number of journals right now, but by selecting this, only article titles are going to be returned. So the only change we're going to make to this search is checking that box. And when we perform the search again, it's just going to have the single entry for that one article. So when I mentioned periodicals before, I imagined a number of you were probably thinking newspapers, and in particular historic ones that may have information of note for your research. So we do have a couple of those, but in that regard we also have partnerships with several databases that are maintained by other institutions, and these are all benefits of full membership with NEHGS. So the easiest way to access these external databases is from the front page using this link, External Databases, just above the search box on the home page. So provided that you're logged in as a full member, you'll see this page listing the 4 external databases we currently offer. Now again, these aren't available to guest users. You must be a paying member, as well as you'll probably recognize some of these databases, and you can't necessarily bookmark the pages you go to there if you do that sort of thing. You can't access these sites directly. In order to get these databases through your membership, you do have to come to this page and access them that way. So included in these databases is 19th century U.S. newspapers, and that includes newspapers, mostly ones that are currently defunct, like the Boston Daily Advertiser and the Providence Patriot. Might still be published. Anyway, we also have early American newspapers, and this includes papers like the Boston Gazette, the New York Evening Post, and those go back further. Some of the papers go back as far as 1690. We also subscribe to marquee biographies online, and they're the publishers of the popular Who's Who collections. And as a result of our new partnership with the American Jewish Historical Society New England Archives, we do offer access to their digital archives. And now all these collections are national in scope. You can follow your lines as they go across the country, and they all come as a part of membership with NEHGS. So in the last webinar, I spoke a lot about the idea of keeping your research as wide as possible and then narrowing gradually, because we don't introduce any fuzziness into your search the way that other genealogical sites do. But the thing about brick walls, like I mentioned with that winding story of me spending too much time in rural Wisconsin courthouses, is that the information isn't where you think it's going to be. Otherwise you would have found it. So introducing some fuzziness and some variance into your searches is really helpful to find those very elusive pieces of evidence. And our search engine has 3 ways of doing that. We have Soundex, we have Wildcards, and then we have search operators. So we'll go through those one by one. So Soundex is a phonetic algorithm. It's very popular with other genealogical searches because what it does is it takes a name and it matches it to similar sounding names by turning it into a number. This is especially useful in cases like Irish or Slavic names, where you have issues of transliteration, you have some questionable penmanship sometimes you have some questionable literacy, and those can all do terrible violence to these names. In fact, the earliest Soundex systems were developed by the census to solve these exact sort of problems. So you don't need to exactly understand how Soundex works in order to use it, but it helps to understand it in that you'll know why it's returning the things that it is. It lets the results be a little bit more predictable. So let's use part of my name, Dvoracek, as an example of a very top-level overview of how the Soundex process works. And there are a lot of Soundex products available. We're going to be referring to what's often called as American Soundex. So the first step is that we keep the first letter. And so in this case, it's a D. And the first letter is always kept. A Soundex code always starts with the first letter of the name. So if you have a name where the first letter is in question, for example, Valchek, it could have a W, could have a V. I'm sure that there's maybe X's or exclamation points. It could be too. But if the first letter is in question, you will have to try a couple of those variants, even using Soundex, because the first letter is always kept. So now we're going to get to the actual business of turning the name into numbers. What we do is we take the first consonant and we compare it to this chart here, dividing the consonants into 6 categories. So if you sort of think about it and say it in your head, you know, an F and a V, or as well as an M or an N, those can tend to get, they sound similar when you, in the run of play, when you're saying a name. And so that's why these 6 categories are grouped the way that they are. So the first letter that I'm dealing with is a V. That's in category 1. So the next letter of the Soundex code is going to be 1. So American Soundex ignores vowel sounds. So since the next letter is a vowel, I'm going to take it out. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and take out all the vowels right now. The next consonant is an R. That's the only member of category 6. So the next number is 6. Skipping past the A, I'm going to look at C, and that's part of the very large category 2. But also, continuing on, I see that the next consonant after the E is a K. That's also part of category 2. And so since we have these 2 letters that are in the same category, we're only going to count it once. So rather than it being 2 separate 2's, it's just a single 2. And now we're done. And even if there had been more letters, we would have been done anyway, because all Soundex codes are a letter, that first letter of the name, and then 3 more numbers. So Dvoracek codes out to D162. Now, if I were to do that same process to names I've met some of my cousins having, they all code out to D162 as well. Things are looking up. Things are looking up for the Dvoraceks. So To use Soundex on our search engine, Soundex is only available in the last name field. It's really what it was designed to do, and so it's the only field that we have active for it. By clicking the Use Soundex box over the last name field, rather than searching for the actual letters that you put in there, it is going to take that, convert it into a Soundex code, and search for that instead. So I'm going to search for Dvoraceks. I know there weren't a lot of them, but I'm going to search them across all databases. They're going to roll in, and I'm going to have 16 more lines to research. It's going to be great. Except Soundex, especially if you're going to search across all databases, it can be a bit of a blunt instrument. A lot of these names don't look like they should sound anything like Dvoracek. Devereaux, DeForest, Vandenberg, DeFries. But if we were to go through that process with all of these names, we'll see that all of them also code out to D162. So Soundex in particular is best used with some sort of location or database constraint. Otherwise you're going to get entirely too many results to deal with. So another way that we can expand our search is by using wildcards. And so wildcards, just like if you were to think about the Joker in poker, can take the place of other characters. And we've got two of them that can be used, and these wildcards can be used in the name fields, it can be used in the location field, as well as in the keyword field. So the first one of these is the question mark. And the question mark can take the place of any one single character. So just for example, I'm going to use the other half of my name, Hanson. Now if I type in H-A-N-S question mark N, it'll return results both with the proper Norwegian spelling, Hanson-O-N, or the fraudulent Swedish spelling, E-N. Send email to webmaster@nehgs.org. Now other useful cases for this could be if you have an Elizabeth and you don't know whether it's going to be marked with an S or with a Z. But when you're using the question mark, the results returned must have a single character for each question mark. So if there were some corruption of Hanson that had both the O and the E, had two characters, that wouldn't return because that question mark is only one character. On the other hand, there must be a character there. So if there was some corruption that had neither the O or the E, that also wouldn't return because it can't represent 0 characters. It has to be 1. So even more powerful than the question mark is the asterisk. And the asterisk can replace any number of characters. So for an example, if I type in W-O-O-D asterisk, that's going to return last names like Wood, Woods, Woodward, Woodbridge, anything else that starts with those 4 letters and then continues on. So rather than just standing for one character, you can see it not only stands for multiple characters like in Woodward, it can also stand for 0 characters and it will just return Wood. These are very powerful, but the one limitation to them is that you have to have at least 2 characters before you can use a wildcard. One way to think of it is that using a wildcard, you're essentially shorthand for performing a lot of different searches at once. And so the closer those wildcards get to the front of your search terms, the longer the search is going to take. And so we've set it up. You need to have at least 2 characters in order for the search to return in a reasonable amount of time. So you can't have, say, W asterisk. You would have to have at least 2 characters before you can use a wildcard. So there's lots of different ways to use these, and actually if there are ideas that you've come up with using these wildcards, especially ones that apply to your family history research, let us know using the chat or the questions box. And we're actually going to go over some of the best ones that we like at the end of this seminar. So start sending them our way. So Soundex and the wildcards are ways to re-expand those searches after we've been spending so much time narrowing them down. We have other operators we can use to combine search terms and really get more control over our search. So you can use this to both expand or constrain them again. And the first ones are our standard Boolean terms. These would be and, or, and not. All of these are placed between two terms to make them interact in a particular way. So for example, by searching William and Bradford, that would require both of those terms to appear in our search results. Consequently, if we put in William or Bradford, only one of those would need to appear in order for the search to, in order for it to be returned in our search. So not is a special case. Not can be used in combination with either of the other two, and that will exclude particular words from your results. So if I were to put Bradford and not William, that will return any results with the name Bradford. So for example, a lot of those Robert Bradford results that we were getting looking in the Mayflower Descendant, while leaving out probably the much larger number of records that would have William Bradford associated with them. One thing of note with our search engine at AmericanAncestors.org is that to use these operators, you must spell out the word. Every search engine that I know of anyway incorporates these concepts in some fashion. A lot of them use characters to do that, but our search engine, you have to type out the full word. So we have three more operators that we can look at beyond these Boolean terms. We have the double tilde, w/n, and we're going to replace n with a number, and the plus sign. So the double tilde stands for a numeric range. So for instance, if I were to search 1900 double tilde 1950, it'll return results that have any number between 1900 and 1950, whole numbers, for those mathematically inclined. Now keep in mind that for all of these operators, unlike the wildcards, these operators can only be used in the keyword field. And since we're working in the keyword field, there's no way for our search engine to know whether this number refers to a year, whether it refers to a population, or whether it perhaps refers to a line item on a ship's manifest. It's really just going to be looking for those numbers. So our example, the odds of it being a year are pretty high, but they're not guaranteed. So the second is w/n, where we replace n with a number, and that stands for within n words. Let's go back to one of our searches that we did in our first part for Percy Burrell. And if I were to replace the search for just Percy Burrell with Percy W5 Burrell, that return for Grace Crom's marriage record is still going to appear, because it doesn't refer to order. It's, as you can see, Percy is found after Burrell. It's a maiden name and somebody's first name or somebody's middle name, and there's only two words between them, so we're well within the 5 words that we're looking for. But this is a great way if you're looking for particular relatives, who will often be, if you're looking at a particular sketch, oftentimes the first name will be at the front, and even though you'll have a lot of family members who use that surname, they're all going to be referred to by first name in that sketch, and this operator is a great way to find those. So our last operator is a plus sign, and this indicates that the terms must be adjacent to each other. A number of search engines use something similar with quotation marks, but on AmericanAncestors.org we use a plus sign. So if I were to type in Percy plus Burrell, then it's going to force those two to be next to each other in that order. And so Grace Cram isn't going to appear in that in that search, because we have to have those two words, Percy Burrell, right in that order. And lastly, all of these operators can be combined and put in order using parentheses. Again, for those mathematically inclined, think back to your order of operations. The stuff in the parentheses happens first. So let's say I want to come up with a real complicated search. I want to search across all journals where John or Ted appears within 7 words of Kennedy and doesn't include Robert, and has a number between 1953 and 1960 in it. So that's what that string would look like. You can get even more complicated than this. Keep in mind that this goes in the keywords field, not anywhere else. And so if we start doing some more complicated search queries like this, so it'd probably be a great time to go back and use that save that search feature once you get things just right and a set of results that you're interested in. So operators can get very complicated, but they're very powerful. So if you need clarification, this chart is available on our subject guide on usingamericanancestors.org, and you can get that on our online learning center at this URL. There you can find how-to instructions, videos, you can get and some more tips to get the most out of your searches. Additionally, you'll be able to watch a recording of this video as well as the video of part 1 of usingamericanancestors.org, also on our online learning center within the next couple days. So, in review, make sure to use that user profile, particularly the ability to save searches and to create your own collection of favorite databases. Second, search our collection of journals to take advantage of the work of genealogists past. Make sure to stand on the shoulders of giants. And if you're a paid member of NEHGS, take a look at those external databases. They can have some fantastic resources in there. And lastly, broaden your search, really take control of your search using Soundex, using Wildcards, and operators to find exactly what you're looking for. So, thank you all for joining us today.
Great. Thanks, Andy, for your presentation. So now let's answer some of your questions. A lot of you have questions, which is great. And again, if you have a question for Andy about anything that he's covered in this presentation or perhaps something that he covered in part 1, please go ahead and type it into the question field to the right of your screen. Also, if you have any examples, perhaps from your own research of search terms using wildcards or operators, and if you want to share those with the group, you can also type those into the chat box to the right of your screen. So, some questions. We have a question from Mark asking about the external databases and if it's included when you do an advanced search, or do you have to access those through the home page?
The external databases, so the 19th century newspapers, the U.S. newspapers going back to 16-something, those are not included in a normal search from our advanced search page. Since those are maintained and operated by other institutions, they're not included in that search. That search, our advanced search page only covers the databases that we administer, any content on our website, as well as you can get to the SSDI from there. So those external databases are not included in the search. You do have to access them separately.
Okay. Sarah has a question about Soundex, if they need to know the coding process in order to use Soundex.
You don't need to know the coding process, but I find that stepping through it helps because most people's encounters with Soundex are just that it exists as a checkbox on some genealogical site. I want you to be able to understand a little bit more about why it returns what it does, especially since a lot of those names can seem so far afield. If you're actually interested in a real deep breakdown of how American Soundex works, Dick Eastman's very popular genealogy blog has a real step-by-step guide of how they do it. So much so that the Library of Congress is actually using that as their resource for explaining how it works now. So it's not necessary, but it will help you. I hope that it'll help you use it better.
Great. Sandy asks, can you use a wildcard and a Boolean within a search term, within the same search term?
Absolutely. You can use, as you saw, the Boolean terms allow you to combine terms, and so you can, either one of those terms can have wildcards involved in them. You can really get some particularly wild searches going on, but for each operator you add, and especially for each wildcard you add, it is going to put, you could call it a little bit of stress. You're making the search engine work a little bit. So those results aren't going to be returned as quickly as they would be if you just did a normal search for Robert Bradford. So keep that in mind as you're building these search queries, but you can definitely combine them in that manner.
So similarly, Bob asks, can you use more than one wildcard in the search term? And it seems like yes.
Yes, you can use multiple wildcards. You can use the asterisk and the question mark at the same time. One thing that you can do that I suppose I didn't touch on so much was that if you are expecting more than one, if you have more than one character that's in question, but you know how many it's going to be, you can actually put multiple question marks in a row. So if you have, I think that O'Brien is a somewhat canonical example. You're pretty sure that it's going to start O, B, R, and there's going to be two somethings, and then N. You can actually put two question marks there, and it'll force it to be two characters rather than where we're looking at one character in the example of my name. Whereas a asterisk, it could be, again, anything from 0 to an infinite number of characters. So that's another way you can use the question mark.
Great. Ruth asks if the search engine ignores punctuation.
Yes. That's not the most confident answer I've had, as you can tell, but I believe that it ignores most punctuation. That's one of the reasons that we don't use quotation marks, is because as it searches, that keyword field searches every field in every database, and so for in a lot of instances, like that marriage record that we had a sort of a glancing blow with a couple times, that whole thing is in a field. And I think that for the ease of not worrying about punctuation standards over the course of 300 years, the search engine does ignore punctuation. But I will actually talk to our digital collections staff and get a more proper answer that we can then add to our subject guide.
Okay. Two questions about operators. The first is from Kathy. She wants to know if you need to include spaces between the operators when you use them.
Yes. The operators have to be. Yes. The operators have to be divided by spaces. Otherwise, the search engine is going to interpret those as words, or one long word that will probably not appear in our records.
Okay. And also about operators, Elizabeth wants to know if the operators have to be in caps.
The operators do not have to be in capitals. We only did that throughout the course of the seminar here to make sure that they stood out from our search terms. But they do not need to be in all caps in order for the search engine to recognize them.
Great. A few questions from part 1. Concerning saving and printing is there, Anne wants to know if you can save an entire article or if you have to do it page by page.
Unfortunately, at this time, since in order for our database system to recognize so many different kinds of databases, each page really is in its own silo. And so this is something that we're looking at hopefully rolling out in the future, but for right now, each page is its own file, and so there's no way to print an entire article. Unless it's a relatively recent article from from one of our publications, the Register or the American Ancestors magazine. Those are available as full issue PDFs to paying members, and but that's something that we're continuing to look into.
And also in part one, we talked about saving each database image, each page as a separate PDF, and then combining them into one file. So that does, and then from there you can print it as one document. So that does kind of help with organization and save some time. Another question concerning viewing articles, and this is also from Anne. She gets quite frustrated controlling the image with the cursor. So how do you kind of manipulate the image to either zoom in, zoom out, move up, move down, that kind of thing?
Personally, once I have zoomed into a level where I'm comfortable reading, I generally use the arrow keys. Because as long as you've clicked in the image viewer, I might actually try that out right now. I believe that you can control it with the arrow keys, and that gives you a little bit more, because I understand, especially with the Silverlight viewer, it can be pretty touchy. So that would be my suggestion. Or the JavaScript viewer has a little bit, is not quite as much of a hair trigger.
Okay, and Anne is actually multitasking, and she's actually on the website right now. She's logged in, and she just needs a reminder as to where her profile is.
Your profile page will be on the at the top of every page. It will say "Welcome, Anne," and just to the left of login, help, about NEHGS, it will be above the seal where it says AmericanAncestors.org, and that's where your profile page will be.
Okay, and Beth has a question. How would you deal with searching for names that are often abbreviated, such as WM for William?
That, in the particular case of William, that's something where a wildcard would come into, would be very useful, because those will be returned by W*M. It will take a little bit of, that will probably take, I mean, one thing that you can do is you can get rid of, by searching for W*M, then using our operators, and not William, that'll get rid of a lot of what will end up being the noise from the name being written out in full, and it will just give you those abbreviations. There are other indications that probably would not be as simple as that, but it gives you a idea of how to combine these tactics that we've been talking about today.
Great. Evelyn asks, just kind of as a refresher, so once you've saved some of those favorite databases and they appear in your profile, will choosing all in the advanced search page always just include those favorite databases? If so, how do you go back to searching all databases?
The option for all only searches your favorite databases when the checkbox above database that says favorites only is checked. If you uncheck that box, you'll once again go back to searching across all of our databases, as well as all your databases will be available from the databases drop-down menu.
Okay, and another question with wildcards. Can a wildcard be a first character in a search term?
As of right now, no. You need to have at least, because our search engine deals with things, in the reading style, left to right. That's one reason that as wildcards get closer to the left, why searches will take longer, because it's going to return everything that matches everything up to the wildcard, and then use everything to the right of the wildcard to refine it down from there. And so if you were to have it at the as the very first character, it essentially start out by returning every single result that we have, and there's no way that our search engine would allow that before saying, no, you're taking too long, you're timed out. So that's why we have the requirement that you need at least 2 characters before that wildcard. Either one of them, either question mark or asterisk.
And June just wants to know if you can give another example of the with or the w/n operator and how that might be used.
I think that the most useful one is I think that one that comes to mind a lot is if you have genealogies or journal articles about someone particular's life. There's one about the increasingly silly one about a doctor and his brother. The doctor was often referred to by his last name. But then, to avoid confusion, the brother was referred to by his first name. Let's come up with some terrible names for this. Dr. Jones. Sam and David Jones. Dr. David Jones has a journal article about him. His brother Sam does something silly. If you're looking for Sam Jones, it's the last name is going to appear somewhere in the vicinity, but not very often right next to each other, and that's one reason that the within operator can be used, can be very useful. That's very circuitous. I'm sorry about that.
Robert wants to know how long are searches saved. If your membership lapses, and then you join up again, will those saved searches still be there for you?
They are saved in perpetuity, as long as this incarnation of the website exists. If you remember, the Save Search feature is something that's available for guest users as well as paying members, and so you don't lose your searches if your membership lapses. They will still be waiting for you when you return for. If you choose to renew your membership.
Okay, and let me just see what else we have here. Beth wants to know, how should we make sure that search results include places where the surname is listed first? So, for example, Peck, William.
I'm sorry, could you say that again?
So how would you, what kind of operator would you use to make sure that your search returns results when within the image or within the record the surname is actually before the first name?
Oh, that would be another excellent time to use the within, because if, for example, if you were did you use Gregory Peck as the example?
I said William Peck.
Oh, okay. I'm going to use Gregory Peck as the example. So that would be a case where you could do something as close as within 1, so w/1, and that would essentially mean that return everything where it reads Gregory Peck or then Peck Gregory, since that's really the only way that they can be within 1 word of each other. That would be a great way to find when it's listed first name first or whether it's listed last name first.
So I think that's another, Anne asks about excluding people whose first name matches, perhaps several people on one page or one image. So in the case of Joseph Poole, how, again, what operator would you use to make sure that you're in fact looking for Joseph Poole and not, Joseph Clancy and then also Tom Poole on the same page?
Yeah, the within one, or if you're pretty sure you know how it's going to, the direction that it's going to be going, whether it's going to be first name listed first, that would be a time to put in a plus sign.
Okay, great. So thank you again, everyone, for your questions. If we haven't gotten to your question about the website, please feel free to contact us at webmaster@nehgs.org. We also have a subject guide that Andy mentioned previously on using AmericanAncestors.org, which is available at our online learning center, and that may answer some additional questions. We have how-to videos up there, step-by-step instructions, and more. And I'll also include a link to that page in your follow-up email. And of course, if you have more detailed questions about the specifics of your research, how to locate records or ancestors, how to break down brick walls, you may want to consider scheduling either a consultation or hiring our research services team. And you can reach both departments at the emails currently on your screen. And I'll also include those in your follow-up email. So thank you again for joining us today. As you leave the event, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to grow our webinar series and our online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful, so I do thank you in advance. If you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online or in-person educational programs, please visit our online learning center, AmericanAncestors.org/learning-center. I hope to see you at other webinars and online courses in the future. Goodbye for now.